Good evening. Welcome to the June 28th, 2021 Matthews Board of Commissioners meeting. I'm Mayor John Higdon. I'd like to start with some introductions. To my left and your right is Assistant Town Manager Becky Hawk, Commissioner Jeff Miller, Commissioner Larry Whitley, Mayor Pro Tem Renee Gardner, Town Manager Hazen Blodgett, Town Attorney Charlie Buckley, Commissioner Dave Bland, Commissioner John Urban, Commissioner Ken McCool, Town Clerk Lori Canapino, and our Communications Coordinator Maureen Keith. I'd like to remind everyone that this meeting is being held in person with the commissioners and myself, but there will be some speakers who are participating remotely. And we have had some difficulty with our Zoom connection at an earlier meeting we had this evening. So I'll remind everybody that's participating remotely that they can go to the YouTube live stream if they have difficulties with Zoom. And the instructions for that can also be found at matthewsnc.gov. Okay, we'll start with invocation from Commissioner Larry Whitley.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, all. I want to do two things tonight. I want us to know that this month we honor Juneteenth. The celebration of Freedom Day originated in commemorating the Union troop arriving to formally notify over 250 enslaved people of their freedom. 2 years after the Amendment of 1863 was enacted. This day came to be known as Juneteenth, the 19th. The United States set on a long road of freedom promise. Now Juneteenth is now a federal holiday of Blacks' resistance for joy and reverence of the history of Black America and the interesting reality of American history. Juneteenth, June the 19th, now federal holiday. Also, I would like for you to join me in prayer as we pass the town budget tonight, but also as we remember those 10 persons that have been found dead and 151 missing persons in Miami, Florida in the condominium collapse of those. So would you join me in prayer, those would like to. Our Father, we thank you for yet another day, our very life, our health, and for strength. Now, Father, we pray for those souls that were lost and pray for the survivors and the rescue and those fire and EMS who are risking their lives to save. We ask that you will cover them. We know you are a wise God and there is no mistakes that you make. We don't understand why sometimes, but we understand that you have a master plan. Now, Lord, pray for this board and this town as we make decisions of planning and passing the budget. We ask that all of our guidance that for you, for the citizens, that all that we do be pleasing in your sight, that we do our very best for the citizens of the town of Matthews. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Commissioner Whitley. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the
Thank you. I'd like to move on to agenda item number 4 and recognize the National Parks and Recreation Month. And I'll be presenting this proclamation to employee Scott Rawls, who works for our Parks and Rec department. Whereas parks and recreation programs are an integral part of communities throughout this country, including the town of Matthews, North Carolina, and whereas our parks and recreation are vitally important to establishing and maintaining the quality of life in our communities, ensuring the health of all citizens and contributing to the economic and environmental well-being of a community and region. And whereas parks and recreation programs build healthy, active communities that aid in the prevention of chronic disease, provide therapeutic are physically disabled, and also improve the mental and emotional health of all citizens increase a community's economic prosperity through increased property values, expansion of the local tax base, increased tourism, the attraction and retention of businesses, and crime reduction. And whereas parks and recreation areas are fundamental to the environmental well-being of our community, and whereas parks and natural recreation areas protect groundwater, prevent flooding, improve the quality of the air we breathe, provide vegetative buffers to development, and produce habitat for wildlife. And whereas our parks and natural recreation areas ensure the ecological beauty of our community and provide a place for children and adults to connect with nature and recreate outdoors. And whereas the U.S. House of Representatives has designated July as Parks and Recreation Month, and the town of Matthews recognizes the benefits derived from parks and recreation resources, now therefore be it resolved that the town of Matthews does hereby proclaim July 2021 as Park and Recreation Month in the town of Matthews. In witness whereof, and cause the seal of the town of Matthews to be affixed 21. So I'd like to present this to Mr. Rawls. Scott, would you like to say anything?
Yes. Thank you, Mayor and Board. Parks are at the center of so many experiences and memories for many people. Our local parks, rec centers, and cultural facilities are often the first experiences in nature or introduction to a favorite hobby or physical activity. Parks are places to gather with friends and family for events, spaces to celebrate. Local parks have been essential provided by Parks and Recreation Department. The National Recreation and Park Association theme for Park and Rec Month 2021 is Our Park and Recreation Story. Our staff wants to hear the stories from residents of Matthews, showing how the community has become more vibrant and more resilient because of Parks and Recreation. Our social media and other outlets will be the tools used to highlight local stories that share what our local park, recreation, and cultural facilities and activities mean to the Matthews community. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Marina, we can take a photo. I just like to say, I was mentioning to some folks here on the dais, I was walking my dog earlier this afternoon through one of our parks, Squirrel Lake Park. And as I was walking, my dog named Josie, I overheard the laughter of a lot of children, just continuous laughter, and it made me smile to know that the kids were having such a great time. Scott also oversees our community gardens and sometimes reminds me when it's time to come weed. So thank you. I'd like to move on to agenda item number 5, receive an update on CMS student school assignment from Associate Superintendent for Student Assignment, Akeisha Craven Howell. Welcome to Matthews.
Thank you very much for having me. Good evening. Again, thank you for having me. My name is Akeisha Craven Howell, and I lead the district's Office of Student Assignment and School Choice. And it is a pleasure to be with you this evening to provide an update on a new elementary school that we have the opportunity to build in the area. I will just spend a few minutes this evening just sharing with you our board's process for determining new school boundaries. I will also give some details about the opportunity that is created by a 2017 bond to open a new elementary school in the southeastern part of the county. We'll spend some time previewing the current considerations and then I'll wrap up by sharing the timeline and next steps leading to a fall 2021 vote by our Board of Education for this new school, which is intended to open in the fall of 2022. So a little bit about the process. The superintendent, through his designees, namely myself and my team, gather community input and feedback over a number of sessions. We started that community input and engagement in March of this year, and it will continue up to the board's vote in the fall. That input and feedback informs a number of scenarios that we typically then take back to the community. It's also shared with our superintendent and board, both formally and informally. The most recent formal report and update to the board took place during their meeting on May 25th. And we also had a public hearing at that time when any member of the community could come and share their input and feedback about school assignment issues directly with the board. There are multiple inputs to the superintendent's recommendation and to the board's vote. We've talked already about community input. I'll talk to you in just a moment about policy JCA, which governs student assignment in CMS. And then, of course, achieving the 2017 bond intent, which for this particular project is relief. We know that we have a number of elementary schools close to this new elementary school that are simply overutilized. And this school represents the opportunity to provide relief. The superintendent will make his recommendation to the board for their vote no later than November 2021. The effective date of that change, again, is the opening of the school in the 22-23 school year. That recommendation will specify the new boundaries for the new elementary school, as well as changes to any elementary schools surrounding the new school, and then also any grandfathering if that's applicable. The period between the board vote and when that new school opens, importantly, is leveraged as a planning year, which is typically led by the learning community superintendent until a new school principal is identified. A little bit about the board's policy JCA. It has a single requirement, and that requirement is that all school boundaries are contiguous. That means an unbroken line drawn around a given school site to encompass the school's attendance area. In addition to that single requirement, the board identifies 4 equally weighted priorities that they direct the superintendent and staff to be mindful of in creating new boundaries. That is home to school distance, and so to the extent possible, having students attend the school that is closest to home. Intact feeder patterns, and so the extent to which students who attend elementary school together then move on to middle school together and move on to high school together. Socioeconomic diversity, acknowledging that socioeconomic diverse learning environments benefit all students. And then finally, utilization, the extent to which a school is neither underutilized or overutilized. In addition to those priorities, there are some additional factors that the board asks us to consider. Things like keeping entire neighborhoods together to the extent possible, not moving communities multiple times in relatively short time periods. And so those are also things that staff and the superintendent are mindful of as we develop scenarios for attendance areas. So this map shows some existing elementary schools as well as the site of the new Relief Elementary School. It is a new 45 classroom elementary school located on Idlewild Road in Matthews. It is on the existing Mint Hill Middle School campus. The new site is physically located within the Crown Point Elementary School boundary, and we'll talk in a minute about why that is particularly relevant. When we look at these surrounding elementary schools, Matthews Elementary, Crown Point, Piney Grove, Lebanon Road, and Bain Elementary, students in these elementary schools continue on to a number of middle schools. They include Crestdale Middle School, Mint Hill, Northeast, and Albemarle Road Middle Schools. That group of students then continues on to just 2 high schools, Independence and Butler. Because the board's policy for student assignment requires that all school boundaries are contiguous, that relief site located within the Crown Point attendance area necessarily means we will have to assign some students who currently attend Crown Point Elementary to attend the new elementary school. It is not possible for me to draw a contiguous boundary around the site of that new elementary school and not affect the Crown Point Elementary attendance area. That creates more space at Crown Point Elementary than we need, and that creates an opportunity to provide relief to Matthews Elementary. And so though this bond project was initially created to provide relief to Bain Elementary, Lebanon Road Elementary, and Piney Grove Elementary, its physical location requires that we provide relief to Crown Point and creates an opportunity to provide relief to Matthews Elementary. The table that you see on this slide gives you a little bit of insight into the utilization of the schools that you see on the map. The first column of data is the 1920 enrollment. I've used 1920 here just because the 2021 school year was really one of instability, and so it's difficult to look at school enrollment in that year and have a really good sense of typical enrollment in a school. So we've used 1920 numbers. You then see in that second column of data the number of classrooms in the core facility. So you see Bain Elementary, 1920 enrollment was 925 students. There are 59 classrooms in the core facility. And then you look to the next column and you see the number of mobile units. That is 0 for Bain. You also see the 1920 capacity utilization represented as a percentage, and that is the ratio of classroom teachers to the number of classrooms in the core facility. So a number below 100% means there are fewer teachers in the school than there are classrooms. A number above 100% means there are more teachers assigned to the school than there are physical classrooms in the building. We do not include the mobile units as part of that ratio because we want to know how well the building is being used. Is it underutilized? Is it overutilized? The final column you see there is the 2930 projected enrollment. And so we worked with an external partner to develop these 10-year projections from 1920. We looked at things like enrollment trends in the district, birth rate data in Mecklenburg County. We also looked at zoning patterns, existing building permits, and projected building permits so that we could get a sense of projected enrollment. As we zero in on Crown Point and Matthews Elementary School, you can see at Crown Point, the utilization is 82%. So this is a school that right now is underutilized. However, because of the location of the new elementary school, we will necessarily have to assign some students who currently attend Crown Point to that new elementary school. So that's going to create even more space at Crown Point Elementary. At Matthews Elementary School, you can see that there are 12 mobile units in use, and that in 1920, the utilization was 131%. That is a school that needs relief. A couple years ago, we had to remove a pre-K program from that school because we simply needed more space for the students in K through 5. We also project some growth over the next several years for Matthews Elementary as well. So when we think about kind of current considerations and things where we've asked the community to weigh in, there are 2 portions of the Matthews Elementary attendance area that are under consideration for assignment to either Crown Point Elementary or to the new elementary school. The first portion is north of Highway 51 and south of Sardis Road, and that portion could be assigned to either Crown Point or the new elementary school. One trade-off with this particular portion moving is that there is a subset of that community that experienced the boundary change in 2018-19. There are a group of students who were assigned to Greenway Park Elementary, but resided in Matthews. And so we assigned that group of students to attend Matthews Elementary. And that change just took place in 2018-19. And so typically we try not to move families more than once in such a short period of time. Alternatively, we could look at the portion of Matthews Elementary that is south of Sam Newell Road and east of East Charles Street. That could be assigned to the new elementary school. In either of these scenarios, we are absolutely making a trade-off between utilization and home to school distance. We would be providing relief to Matthews Elementary and filling available capacity at either Crown Point or the new elementary school. But as a result of that, there are some students who would be traveling further from home to school. And so we acknowledge that there's a trade-off between those two priorities there. When we look at Crown Point Elementary, there are a number of changes that we are considering. First, there is a portion of the Crown Point Elementary School, again, that will have to be assigned to the new elementary school. We are looking at the portion of that attendance area that is south of Sam Newell Road and Irvins Creek and east of Treeside Lane. To backfill the existing capacity, the newly created capacity at Crown Point, a portion of Piney Grove Elementary attendance area is likely to be assigned to Crown Point, as is a portion of the Lebanon Road Elementary attendance area is likely to be assigned to Crown Point also. And then we talked already about the potential for students who currently attend Matthews Elementary to either be assigned to Crown Point or to the new elementary school. Here you see just some of the community engagement to date that has taken place since March 22nd. Again, the board reviewed those potential scenarios and held a public hearing on May 25th. The intent is that we will pick back up community engagement when the school year starts again. We find it difficult to do that in any real authentic way during the summer with travel schedules and things like that. So when the school year begins again in August, we will pick back up with that community engagement. The intent being that the superintendent will then take that input and feedback, make a recommendation to the board no later than their November meeting, and the board will vote. And then that elementary school will open at the beginning of the 22-23 school year. I'm happy to receive any feedback that you have or respond to any questions.
I do have a question. Thank you for your presentation. I imagine that parents and students would be somewhat upset to be reassigned to another school regardless of the situation. So I'm trying to understand the logistics of why you would take a school like Crown Point, which is already underutilized, and force people to move from that school when it's already underutilized instead of just adding more and not disrupting the Crown Point students.
Yeah, it really is a function of the board's policy, which requires that all school boundaries are contiguous. And so if I can go back to the slide that has the, right here. Yep. So that pink shading in the middle indicates the Crown Point attendance area. So the red dot is the actual site of Crown Point. And then the area that's shaded there in red is the Crown Point attendance area. The green pentagon is the site of the new elementary school, and it sits within the Crown Point attendance area. Because of the requirement of the board's policy that all school attendance areas must be a contiguous boundary, that means that whatever the boundary is for that relief school must be an unbroken line drawn around that school. And so that necessarily means that there will be some students who currently attend Crown Point who will be assigned to the new elementary school.
I don't understand that policy, but I'll take your word for it. Are there any other questions or comments? Mayor Pro Tem Garner.
Yes, I had a question from a parent asking about their child who's been at Matthews for, from pre-K in 2022, their child will be in 5th grade. Is there a way for them to finish their elementary school at the, okay.
Yes.
And so, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Typically when a new school opens and students are assigned to that school, we grandfather the terminal grade. So if it's an elementary school, students who would be in 5th grade when that new school opens would be automatically assigned to stay at their current elementary school and would have the option to attend the new school if they so chose.
Okay, thank you. And if they have like a 2nd or a 3rd grade sibling, that sibling is required to go to the new school, or can they also get grandfathered in? And
they are typically not grandfathered in. In that case, the family would submit a request for transfer to have that younger sibling stay. And then we just kind of make an assessment based on utilization at the school, how many families we would have in that situation. But certainly it is our goal and priority to keep families, together at the same school whenever we can.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I have another question. Is the Relief School going to facilitate the elimination of any of the extra mobile units at any school?
It should completely eliminate the need for mobiles at Crown Point, and it should significantly reduce the number of mobiles needed at Matthews Elementary. It is all a function of how large a portion of the Matthews Elementary attendance area would be assigned and how many students are in that particular area.
Mr. Blodgett?
One of the things I've found in experience working with the town of Matthews is residents come to the town for lots of do power, cable, you name it. I'm assuming as the date gets closer, we're going to get flooded with inquiries like, why can't the town, or why isn't the town doing anything about this? How can we help you get the word out so that basically they can come to y'all, the decision makers, instead of really flooding our emails?
Amen.
Okay, so
Yes.
You understand the question.
Yeah, I do understand the question. I am happy to, once the school year is up and going again, and we begin scheduling additional community engagement sessions, I am more than happy to share those dates and opportunities with you all as well. So that as you get those emails, you can share that information. We also, on our planning team, there is a general email, planning@cms.k12.nc.us. And so any inquiries that you get via email, certainly feel free to forward those along to us, and we are happy to respond.
Commissioner McCool?
My question is, when will we see the numbers, the capacity utilization, when will we see updated numbers based on the school? Maybe
Based on the new elementary?
Yes, based on what the relief site will do.
Yeah, so what we will do is as we develop those scenarios, we can look at, well, how many students would be moving from any of these existing elementary schools into that relief site. And so then we would update this chart for what we would project for that new elementary school to be in terms of utilization and enrollment, and then what the effect would be on the surrounding elementary schools. And so when we have those scenarios to share with the community when we reconvene in August, we will have that data for you. Absolutely.
Does the new relief school have a name?
It does not. So that process typically takes place after the boundary is developed and a principal is hired, and then the principal engages the community in a naming process. And so, yes, it does get wordy for quite some time to keep referring to it as the new elementary relief school. But that's the hand I'm dealt.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Craven-Howell. We appreciate your presentation.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Town Manager, do we have any items to be added to the agenda?
No, sir, Mr. Mayor.
And Town Clerk, Lori, I understand we don't have any public comment tonight. Is that correct? Move on to agenda item number 8, the consent agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve consent agenda items A through H7.
Second. I have a motion from Commissioner McCool, a second from Commissioner Urban. All in favor? All opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. We'll move on to unfinished business. Item 9A, consider a request for town maintenance of Chimney Hill Road and Overwood Drive. CJ, are you going to present this?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I didn't expect to get to this so quickly. As the board is aware, there are 2 roads that are currently considered private in Matthews, Overwood Drive and Chimney Hill Road. They're located behind the Walgreens and connect to the north end area. Normally, back up a little bit. This was developed as part of a private development for townhomes, and also the lots that had the Walgreens and the Charlotte Metro Credit Union. That was back in 2012 by Con Development. We had been going through the process of taking over those roads starting in 2012, and then there was a lag where we didn't hear anything. In 2018, we were notified that Con Development had gone through bankruptcy. So the roads are there, and there are just a few things that really need to be done that where we would normally bring them up to our standards to take over. They're in fairly good condition. There's some signs that need updating, a few ADA ramps that really need to be redone, but generally there's not a lot of work that needs to be done. There is not a bond available for us to use to do that. Based on the kind of public nature of those roads, where they connect, staff doesn't feel that it's fair to go through the assessment process that we would for a lot of the other neighborhoods to bring them up to our standards. So staff recommends taking them over as is, taking over the maintenance. If we do that at this meeting, then we can add them to our Pell Bill map and start taking in money for those roads. Though it's not significant, it's like $200 a year, I think.
Okay, any questions, comments for CJ? Commissioner Urban?
So CJ, you said that the roads are in fairly decent condition. Do they meet our paving spec and our standards?
They meet the specs that were there when they were built.
All right, stop. So what are our specs today versus what was built?
So now our specs for something like that would be 2 inches of surface, I think 5 inches of intermediate course, and then 8 inches of stone underneath that. I have not cored that, but my assumption is those were built to commercial standards, which at the time would have been somewhere around 8 inches of base. I would say 3 inches of intermediate and 1.5 inches of surface. So maybe 1.5 inches less of asphalt than we would require today.
So what does that mean in terms of longevity? I mean, how long it's been built, and when do we have to be looking at getting in there and doing some rejuvenation or something from that standpoint?
Right. So some things I'd want to do fairly quickly, rejuvenation being one of them. The road is in decent condition. Going out there's only a section of it that looks like it's has aged. That's at the corner of Overwood and North Trade Street. There's an area there that it's that probably should be milled and resurfaced. But the rest of it is in good condition. A lot of it depends on the traffic that goes through there, and that does not take the amount of traffic that like many of our, I say, larger neighborhoods take. So the section of pavement that's in there should be significant enough for it to last the 20 to 30 years we typically see from a neighborhood road.
So, and I guess my last question is that understanding that it was really a request from the residents of the townhomes, but what responsibility does Walgreens and the bank take for Overwood Drive?
So if we did go through an assessment of this, then we could divide it up, the cost of the repairs. There's a question, though, as to how we could divide it up with the townhomes, as usually it's only the homes that front on that road. So it could be that you would only assess the 1, 2, 3, 4 properties that front Chimney Hill from the townhomes, and the rest of them would not get assessed. But we would be able to assess Walgreens, and we would be able to assess the credit union, as well as the private, the other lot at the corner there. There are options of doing it by lot, or you could also do it by area, or you could do it by frontage along the property. Charlie, I don't know if you have more to add.
Well, the only thing I would add is that normally when you do an assessment, it's a result of a petition.
Correct. Where the residents come.
And we have not had a petition, as I understand, at this point.
We have not.
Yeah, so
if we take it over, then there's no way of going back to doing an assessment.
that's correct.
CJ, how much is it going to cost to bring it up to our standard?
I would say there's roughly $5,000 worth of work to do in there. I don't have that in front of me, but it's somewhere in that area.
In total on both roads?
Yes.
And why would we not do an assessment?
One, the length of the process, and two, my thought is if we can only assess those properties, is that fair to the greater community where you have 4 townhomes paying for their portion of all of the townhomes that are accessed.
Mr. Buckley?
It still hasn't been resolved whether or not the townhomes would have to participate since they're not adjoining the road.
Right, except for those 4 properties, right?
Correct. But again, there's no petition, so there is the possibility of involuntary assessment, but that percentage of the assessment is reduced substantially if it's an involuntary assessment. I don't have that in front of me, but I'm sure it's less than 50% that can be assessed. So we're not talking about a lot of money here, I don't think. I'm just to help the board here. I don't think that we're talking about a lot of money that would be assessed.
Yeah, so I guess to add on to that, the cost of staff time and the attorney's time to go through that process may end up being as much as what we would get from the assessment.
But couldn't you tack that on to the assessment?
Oh, the attorney's cost, I'm not sure about hours.
I mean, I guess I'm just sort of looking at this sort of a win-win. These private landowners get this road off their back. The town's going to absorb something for perpetuity. So why wouldn't they have a little of the skin in the game for you to kind of get things rectified? Your time is worth something. It gets applied into the assessment, and we get it back to zero, and we move forward.
Let me add one more thing. I'm not sure, but they may have some form of HOA, like in a residential. I don't know what it would be in the commercial, and you would know far better than I, but they would be the owners of all of the open area. Those businesses may not have any ownership rights in that other than through their interest in the HOA.
Mr. Blodgett?
It's an interesting question, but I think the struggle I think we had when we talked about this earlier, so there you can see on the kind of upper left, well, whatever, middle upper left, there's 4 townhomes that on their side street, right, they abut the road. That you know, their driveway is off one of those other roads, so their side street, and you know, this functions really as a commercial cut through. You know, a lot. It's just not like a cul-de-sac. We've had a couple of those. It's just the residents use them. It's easy to go to them and say, look, you need to, you know, pay for this. In this case, I think our logic was, well, this is not really that expensive from like a big picture of our annual POW bill dues. The headache to go through it. I guess we'd end up with an involuntary assessment because I can't imagine the townhome folks signing up. And now, is it worth a try? I mean, certainly worth a try, but at the same time, we can get it on the POW bill. CJ, it's $200 a year. That's not much. I mean, what's that, 25 years before you get your $5,000 back. But if we do nothing, it will continue to deteriorate. And 10 years from now, we're probably in a worse situation.
I guess my concern is I want to make sure that we're being fair to all the others that we've assessed, given assessments, and we're just not arbitrarily, but in this case, saying we're not going to have an assessment.
And I think we did set a precedent at the previous one where we took out the portions that were considered public use of the roads in that neighborhood, whereas all of these are public use.
So the total cost is about $5,000, and a portion of that could be borne by Walgreens.
If we went through the assessment process, I think so.
I mean, I guess the question is between the landowner where the bank's at and Walgreens and a few others. It seems to me just to be done with it, get the roads off their back, not have to worry about it, to each sort of contribute and stroke a check to be done with it, and you pick it up, would make some sense. I mean, I think to the mayor's point, you're going to have a lot of people just have been assessed. And in this case, it's not happening. That's a weird set of conditions because I know Park Center Drive is also private as well. And yet it's trafficked by everybody else. I mean, it's not the end of the world for $5,000, but I just know that in 8 or 9 years, it's no longer $5,000. It's full bed depth reclamation or something else going on. It's on the taxpayers as a whole.
Well, I do think CJ brings up a good point. So the last one we did Oscar Drive, cul-de-sac, developer went out of business, community came to us, easy. Second one, developer went out of business, the bond wouldn't pay for it all. I think we kind of helped, maybe we initiated it, but then we said, okay, some of this is just for the residents, but some of it's cut through for the neighborhood, and we took that out. So there's a precedent there. I mean, if I were a neighbor, I would argue everything in red is a cut through. That's not serving my neighborhood. I'm not signing up. Now, I guess then the question is, can we go to these bigger corporations and approach them and, can you contribute $2,000 each? And then we get out of it. Maybe they can. Well, the only other thing I would say is the mayor and I tried to call these Strong Haven folks because of their trucks in Hattiesburg, Mississippi last week. Had the phone number, talked to the receptionist, and she said, just a second. And then she said, he's not in. So in my mind, it's like, they don't want to talk to us. And getting folks to talk to you can be difficult and time consuming.
We put bollards up and chain the entry to their driveway.
Yeah.
Yeah, another concern I have is we're overwhelmed with paving needs in the town, and to take on additional mileage of roads when we're not even keeping pace with what we have now, it concerns me, and especially to do it for free, or just take it on and throw it on the taxpayer's back seems unfair.
But we don't think we're going to need to pave it for, did I hear you say 20 years because it's the condition of the road?
So I would say from now, maybe 15 to 20 years, roughly that area before we need to be redone. And that would be whether or not we made those repairs now, it would still be that length of time before it'd have to be redone.
So let me ask you this, so we're not in the game right now. So who takes care of Overwood and Chimney Hill?
No one.
Walgreens, not anybody. It just sits there. No one. How could that be?
That's how it is with most private roads until, most new developments when they come in, unless we require something for them to do before we take it over, nothing else is done for the lifetime of that road.
Until it fails, and then they come
And
to
then
us.
they tell us,
That's
okay.
What's the will of the board? Commissioner Miller.
I'll make a motion that the town begin maintenance of Overwood Drive from North Great Street to its intersection of Chimney Hill Road and Chimney Hill Road from Matthews Township Parkway to the property line of Park Center, and approve the associated resolution adding the streets to the town street system.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
I have a second from Commissioner Bland. Is there any further discussion?
Real quick, Mayor, can we also do the speed limit ordinances and stop sign ordinances
Sure.
as well?
And establish the maximum speed limit and placement of stop signs.
Okay. I have a motion from Commissioner Miller, a second from Commissioner Bland. Any further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? So I'm the Lone Ranger opposing that. So that passes 6-1 with me standing in opposition. That's right.
Good luck finding it.
Going to move on to item 9B, select consultant for 335 East Matthews Street visioning process. Mr. Camp.
Good evening. So 2 weeks ago, we tabled the discussion for the selection of a consultant for a visioning process for property that the town owns at 335 East Matthews Street. There was some concern about the consultant that the town staff had recommended, which was Stewart Design, based on some recent work they've done for the town. Nothing much has changed. This is the same staff memo I presented 2 weeks ago. I'm happy to discuss the merits of other consultants. Maureen, if you'll scroll down a little bit, you can see thank you. So there's the table. These are the 6 firms that submitted proposals to the town. They range from $8,000 to $47,500. But really, it's the will of the board, what you all want to discuss on a plan for moving forward in selection of the consultant.
Commissioner McCool.
My question to you, Jay, is what to you makes Stewart stand out other than the rest, especially given that we were frustrated with work that came to us the last meeting?
Sure. So good question. When we evaluated all 6 proposals, well, 2 things. One, we felt that Stewart had the most well-rounded proposal. It's a partnership with, I believe, Creech and Associates, which is an architecture firm. So Stewart would be handling the master planning, really the horizontal work. Creech would be doing the rendering work that would give us an idea of what the building would look like. So that, coupled with, in our current year budget, we had about $15,000 to spare. So we only really had 2 firms that came in at a budget that we could afford in this current year's budget. So that was sort of the rationale behind Stewart.
I guess a follow-up is, when we saw Stewart's drawings for the Veterans Memorial Park, it was hand-drawn, kind of last-minute looking at. That was frustrating for me specifically, and so to hire them for another $14,000 is not ideal in my book.
Can I just respond to that quickly? Because I think it's a good, interesting point. We did that when Stewart came before the board. I asked them to come because we had a problem, right? That there wasn't, the pillars weren't where the board had seen it. So I haven't talked to Stewart, but I'm assuming they would say, well, that wasn't the kind of face that they wanted to put on for the town board. But in my mind, it's like, look, let's get this boundary issue of the park straight. That's more important than kind of rudimentary drawings or however you'd say it. So personally, I would not ding them because for me, the point wasn't so much the look, it's making sure we got those pillars straight, and then y'all see a more of a dressed up version. However, I did think some good points were brought up at that meeting from this board as well, but I wanted to at least acknowledge that.
Mayor Pro Tem Garner.
To Hazen's point, I would like to sort of challenge that a little bit. I think that when we saw what they were bringing forward, and I mentioned this as we discussed it, it lacked imagination and it lacked vision for potential there. But also it showed to me that they weren't fully listening to the parameters set forth, and they weren't really fulfilling the obligation that we hired them for. I would hate to get into this process and get further down the road and find that to be the case for this project as well. I personally would like to see or hear a discussion about considering coal, nest, and stone or clock and block. I appreciate Jay's perspective on this, and looking through those projects, can definitely appreciate the cost or the proposal from Coal, Nest, and Stone, and understand that their ability is there to do a project like this. I thought that Cluck and Block, including block design, they are familiar with Matthews. They have an understanding of the aesthetic of Matthews. They have an understanding of what we are looking for, but they also bring a different level of energy and a broader perspective to what could be an interesting space in Matthews. And I think, we could really get an exciting use of that land back from them. I feel like what they proposed included a lot of listening, participation, and a lot of energy that we would need to get a successful product, I guess.
Jay, I've got a question. You ranked Stewart number 1 based on the consideration of being, I believe you said, less than 15,000. So if money were no object, how would you rate these firms?
So that's a tough place to put me. I will say the 3 firms we've just discussed, Colginess, Cluck, and Stewart, all those would be our top 3 ranked firms, and I think any of those 3 firms would give us some good direction for how we want to move forward with this project. Looking purely at the portfolio of projects they've done in the past, I think Colginess is the best fit If you look at their website, read the RFP response, they specialized in a lot of urban mixed-use infill projects that tend to be more complicated on smaller sites. These are not larger 5 and 10 acre master plans communities. Having said that, Cluck Design, their setup is a little bit inverse. About $16,000 of that fee is the architecture firm's fee. So you can see that the architecture firm is driving the creative design process with Cluck, and Block is handling refining the site plan. At least that's how I understand it in reading through. My recommendation to you this evening would probably be to go with Cold's Nest with a pretty hefty contingency if we want some additional architecture or rendering work done, because I do think that was where they were the lightest on their proposal, that they would do their rendering work in-house. Whereas Cluck Block, you're getting in LA, you're getting a landscape architecture, civil engineering firm partnering with an architecture firm. So you have everyone in the room.
Commissioner Urban.
So what you're saying, Jay, is if we went with Cole Janess, we could have a fairly significant contingency to work up. I think you said you budgeted about $15,000 for this exercise. So if the board saw the 2D aspect of Cole Janess and wanted to bump it up, I'm sure Cole Janess could bring a design team to the table and continue to add to it. I just don't know what we need to be going for, and I would just rather do it in baby steps and sort of see what the deliverables are. And if the board wants to continue to see more visualization, you have the contingency up to your $15,000 in which to work from, which I think would be good. I've worked with every single person on there, and Cole Janess is just as competent as the rest of them.
So keep in mind that we are trying to build consensus for what this site could ultimately look like, but at the same time, we are not finalizing the design of the building unless the board wants to go that direction, because if the end result is that we do put out an RFP and solicit bids for sale to the development community, whoever's the winning bidder is likely going to have their own architect they bring to do the design work. So.
Any further comments or questions or motions?
I'll make a motion. I'd like to make a motion that we authorize town manager to a contract with Cole Janess Stone not to exceed 15,400. I know it's indicating 8,000, but if we need to add something to it, we can go up not to exceed that.
Okay. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Commissioner Whitley, a second from Mayor Pro Tem Garner. Is there any further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you.
And we will be bringing a budget amendment back next month to take care of the funds. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jay. All right, go to the big item for this evening. Consider adoption of the fiscal year 21-22 general fund and tourism budget ordinance, CIP and fee schedule. Hazen, do you want to start, or I have some commentary? If not,
I don't need to start, Mayor. Don't hurt me.
I think I have your presentation memorized. Unfortunately, I shouldn't say. I do want to make a few comments prior to our budget vote, and I want to start by saying this board, like many or most all of them that preceded it, strives at every turn to be fiscally conservative and to be a good steward of the taxpayers' money. We all live here just like as everyone else does, and we're taxpayers as well. Balancing the needs of the community and the level of service residents desire is never an easy task, and the shared goal of town staff and these elected officials that sit in this dais is to keep the tax rate as low as possible while still providing the level of service that you expect when you live in Matthews. And as our population has grown, so have our operational expenses. I will say that this is the 8th budget that I participated in, and it's been the most heavily debated. Really just unbelievable. I can't tell you how deeply we have dug into this budget to try to cut it, try to tear it apart. I'd like to particularly thank Mayor Pro Tem Garner for doing an outstanding job of really turning over every single stone possible to see if we could cut this in any way without raising taxes. So let me say to start with, I believe the number one commitment of your elected officials is to ensure your safety. The The proposed budget includes provisions for adding 4 patrol officers that will bring the police department up to staffing levels that were recommended all the way back in 2018, and allows 7 patrol officers to be assigned to each patrol squad. And our fire chief currently manages approximately 80 career and volunteer staff members with no full-time deputy chief, and the new position will help him with emergency incident management, administrative functions, and serve as a backup for the chief as they manage 24-hour operations. And I can tell you from working with Chief Kinnenberg over this past year, as he served as our emergency operations chief, that I was on calls at 6 in the morning that Chief Kinnenberg was on, and I was on calls at 10 o'clock at night that Chief Kinnenberg was on. And the difference between me and him is I took a break and a nap and had lunch in between, and he didn't. So great job, Chief, and we appreciate how hard you've worked, but recognize that you certainly need some help. For comparison, other fire departments of similar size to ours and call volume across the state typically have 1 to 3 deputy or assistant chief positions to support operations, and we have none here. Our long-beleaguered Public Works Department is in need of a facilities maintenance technician and a landscape maintenance worker, desperately, in my opinion, to manage ongoing workloads. The current department is smaller than it was in 2004. Despite significant increases in the number of roads and sidewalk miles they have to maintain, the acres of park space they take care of, square footage of facilities to maintain, they are stretched to the limit. I'm having a hard time making eye contact with CJ to tell him he's got to wait another year to hire some help. They need the help. They need it now. I recognize that, CJ. This budget also includes mandated cost increases to the solid waste collection program. Commissioner Miller has pointed out that our solid waste fees are a significant portion of our taxes, picking that garbage up every week. Mandated increases to state retirement contributions. Those are mandated by the state. We don't have any choice. Pay adjustments for our telecommunicators who are vital to the safety of our town. We need to make their salaries a little more competitive. They fulfill a very important position here in the town, and sometimes they leave for a very minor pay increase to go to Union County or Charlotte or whatever. We need to stop that. And also a 3% merit pool for our employees, which I think is very important. A while back, we conducted a study and we make sure that our employees we attempt to pay them at least 60% of comparables in the region, meaning that 40% make more. And so I don't think our employees, they deserve this merit pool increase, and we're going to lose employees if we don't keep up with what other local communities are paying their employees. So now I'd like to answer a few questions. The first question that I've heard quite a bit, and everybody on this dais has heard, is this has been a really tough year financially for a lot of people. We had a pandemic. Why in the world would you raise taxes now? Well, the needs of the town plus rising costs are outpacing our revenues. Taxes are one of the few options our government has to raise new revenue here in Matthews. A nominal property tax increase is necessary to keep up with the service needs of our community. Another question that I've heard many times, go out and get a cup of coffee, somebody come up and say, hey, with all the development in Matthews over the last several years, why do we need to pay more in taxes? Doesn't all this development we see all around grow the tax base? Well, it does, but the average annual growth rate of the town's tax base over the last 10 years, believe it or not, is only 1.8%. And costs associated with town services are rising at a rate of 2.5 to 3% a year. So simply put, the property tax base is not growing fast enough to cover the escalating costs of our increased operational needs. Another question I've heard quite often is, hey, John, the town is getting nearly $10 million from the federal government. How can you possibly raise taxes? What's wrong with you? Well, the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 is an unprecedented funding opportunity for local governments like Matthews, but as of today, the U.S. Treasury has issued interim guidance that seems to change daily on how these funds can be spent. And our biggest worry from our excellent staff, Town Manager Blodgett and Assistant Town Manager Hawk, are that we don't want to spend these funds and then have the federal government come back and say, hey, that $2 million you spent, you need to pay it back to us because you spent it incorrectly. We've had multiple meetings with people at the state and federal levels. They've used terms like The rules are really squishy. We don't know if you can do that or not. I mean, this is the advice we're getting from the supposed experts. So it's very difficult for us to pull the trigger and to pay for a lot of things with these funds when we don't know if we really can. I want you to know the town is already exploring all options on how to best spend the funds, but we cannot make commitments until after the rules are finalized. Based on the information currently available, most allowed uses of the ARPA funds appear to be restricted to programs and expenses the town does not even currently provide. However, ARPA will likely be able to fund new programs for the town. Examples of programs the town might consider are premium pay for our first responders, completing additional stormwater projects, which CJ would love, affordable housing projects, and funding community-based programs that provide assistance to our citizens that have been most impacted by the pandemic. In other words, ARPA funds will help our community in the near future, but the help will mostly be for new programs, not for our town's regular budget. The town is also required to approve the tax rate and budget by June 30th each year, and with no final rules available before that date on how ARPA funds may be spent and a limited ability to support the town's operating budget, we cannot count on these funds to help offset a tax increase. Here's another favorite question. Why is Matthews the only town in Mecklenburg County proposing a tax increase? Is everybody else doing things so much better than Matthews and you guys have to raise taxes? Well, despite being compared to each other, the other 6 towns other than Charlotte, and I'm talking about Cornelius, Davidson, Huntersville, Mint Hill, Pineville, and Matthews within Mecklenburg County, we are all very unique and we each must set a budget to meet our individual needs for our own communities. Matthews has historically budgeted extremely conservatively throughout the years, for decades really. So there's not a lot of fat that we can fall back on to cover the need for a tax increase. We don't have any extra room in our operating budget to add this needed extra staff or to keep up with increasing costs just based on natural growth of our community. Some other towns in Mecklenburg County, like Huntersville, are growing incredibly fast, much faster than Matthews, and they have enough revenue to meet their needs. Huntersville, I mean, for those of you that have lived here, if you went to Huntersville 10 years ago and compared it to Huntersville today, it's probably doubled in size. Other towns like Davidson and Cornelius generate more revenue per property because their average property values are much higher than Matthews. As an example, if Cornelius had the same tax rate as Matthews, our current 28 cents per $100 valuation, they would generate almost $7 million more in revenue than Matthews every year because their property values are so much higher than ours. Their average house is tax valued at $750,000. Ours are $300,000. Like many communities across the state and country, Huntersville and Davidson also charge an additional solid waste fee to residents every year to help cover the cost of those services. And that's something that I personally have not been in favor of. It's been discussed, but we don't charge anybody in Matthews a separate fee to pick up the solid waste. It's covered in your tax bill. So each town is unique and each must use different funding methods to generate different levels of revenue to pay for the services their citizens desire. And our needs and budgets are adjusted every year, and this can result in tax increases for some communities, but not others. Another comment I'll make, I was speaking with Commissioner Miller prior to our meeting, is Matthews has historically, for the last many years, produced a revenue neutral tax increase. So when we had the reevaluations and the prices of everybody's homes went up, we lowered the tax rate to make it revenue neutral so your tax bill didn't go up. Well, that didn't help restore our coffers when all of our costs were continuing to go up. I'd also like to respond to a public comment during the budget public hearing 2 weeks ago regarding the advertising budget for open town positions. It was a budget item of about $31,000. And for the record, I want to tell you why I support this budget request. It's because of a larger town initiative to ensure we're casting a wider net for all of our open positions. We want to get the very best employees we can to work here in Matthews, and competition for talent is very strong. And many of the skill sets and certifications we need are very specific to the government services we provide. We can't just advertise in 1 or 2 places and expect to cast the net wide enough to get those people that have those skill sets. The town also is striving to have as much diversity as possible within our pools of qualified applicants, and the extra funding will help ensure our positions are seen by applicants across the region and throughout the United States. One of the discussions was, why don't we use Indeed as a cost-effective way to meet these objectives? Town staff has utilized this approach in the past and found Indeed.com cost approximately $150 per post, and also creates a significant administrative burden because their internal application function does not connect in a way to the town's application portal. So when someone applies through Indeed, they must be contacted and directed to apply directly to the town website. And based on our previous experience, unfortunately, many times they don't follow through, making the cost and administrative efforts of using Indeed higher than the benefit that it might provide. And finally, the funding request for advertising represents a very, very small percentage of the town's overall payroll, approximately 0.3%, making it a very small investment towards our efforts to continue to find exceptional staff to serve our community. Like all town expenditures, I want to let you know that it will be monitored for effectiveness. And if it's not effective, we'll stop doing it. So we will be watching that very carefully. So the bottom line is this year's budget includes a 1.5 cent increase in the property tax rate. And this is a change from the 28 cents per $100 evaluation to 29.5 per $100 evaluation. This new tax revenue will fund 7 needed positions to improve or maintain operational standards in 3 of our largest departments: a deputy fire chief, 4 police patrol officers, a facilities maintenance technician, and a landscape maintenance worker. With the average home value in Matthews being about $300,000, this 1.5 cent tax increase would increase that homeowner's property tax bill by approximately $45 annually. And it would raise an additional $762,000 in revenue for the town. So again, apologize for the length of that discussion, but I wanted to go over all the pertinent facts. Again, this board has had countless meetings. We've really looked. It was really our hope that we were going to be able to use this ARPA funding and not raise taxes this year. I sit on several different organizations and meetings like the League of Municipalities and the Metro Mayors Coalition, and the overwhelming advice from everybody else in the state almost universally is to move forward very slowly with this ARPA funding. Almost nobody is spending the money right now. They're waiting to get additional guidance. And I can just give you my word, if there's any way that we can use that money that would help offset, future tax increases or whatever, we will certainly do that. So with all that being said, are there any other comments or questions? Commissioner Miller.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to make a few points. We have a history of the tax rate for the last 10 years here, and our current tax rate of 28 cents is the lowest it's been in all 10 years. 10 years ago, it was 33.25 cents, so that's 5.25 cents more 10 years ago. If we would have kept it at that, we wouldn't be debating it every single year. And 2 years ago, in 2019, it was 35.5 cents. That's 7.5 cents more than it is today. Again, if we would have kept it at that, we wouldn't be having this debate. So I'd like to make a motion in support of the 21-22 General Fund and Tourism Budget Ordinance and fee schedule that's attached in our packet. I recognize that some members of the community have experienced financial setbacks due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And as an act of good faith towards these community members, this board will affirm its intent to spend $1.5 million potentially from the ARPA funds to help mitigate negative economic impacts in Matthews and put it towards affordable housing.
Commissioner McCool. I'm going to second that with a comment. This has been a tough budget season, I think, for all of us. I think I may start getting some gray hairs and look like John Higdon here soon. But, you know, we've looked at this budget every way, and I really was not happy that we're raising taxes. I think after such a hard year, raising taxes is really a tough pill to swallow. But I'll be voting tonight and seconding this because we are putting $1.5 million towards those who are struggling financially because of COVID, and we're going to be able to prioritize that for affordable housing. And so I think that will offset any burdens that this may put on extra folks who are struggling financially. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Miller, a second from Commissioner McCool. Is there any additional discussion or comment or question? All right. All in favor? All opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Again, I know that was tough, but I think necessary for the good of the community. So thank you. Let's move on to item 10B, consider street closure request, Happiness Through Grace 5K road race. Lori, do we have the remote participants, Jen and Jen? And I believe Captain Tyrell, you're going to...
Yeah, I'm happy to address any questions anybody has.
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me? This is Jen with Start to Finish Event Management.
Yeah, we can hear.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Well, I haven't been in one of these meetings in a while. I think the last time we put on a race in this location was the Steve Smith Lace Up Sun 5K. And what we're requesting is exactly the same course that race used. So would you like me to go through what the course is or just be here to answer questions, or what should be my role tonight?
We have a map.
Yeah, if you could maybe briefly discuss the map that we can see on the screen now. Just give us a brief rundown of the course.
Yep, let me see. Okay, so the race will start in front of Stumptown Park on Trade Street. It'll go northeast to John Street and take a right. We're requesting that block between John and Main Street be closed for the duration of the race. The finish line is actually on Trade Street, so it's not in the park. It's right in front of the park, and the start line is similar, but in just a little bit of a different location. So the runners will run down John Street in the curbside lane going with traffic, take a right on Kent Drive to cut over to Sadie Drive, come back up to Trade and take a left. And the section between Trade and Main Street, there'll be two-way traffic, two-way runner traffic. We can run those on opposite sides of the street if you want, or we can just go ahead and cross over those runners right when they come up on Sadie Street and run them. You know, we can run everybody in the same lane on Trade, whichever one works best. Then they would continue to run down Trade all the way to Fullwood, take a right on Fullwood, run up to this sort of little cut through that cuts into the Covenant Day School parking lot and sort of on the road that runs around that school. That runs around to Covenant Church Lane, which is just a quick little stretch to get back onto John Street. Take a right on John Street, a right on Irwin, and a right on Main. We did close down Irwin and Main as far as cars going in there. There are neighborhoods along those roads, so we can't totally close those roads down. But when we did the race for Steve Smith, we did not allow cars to drive in there for about an hour during the race. And then back down to Trade Street, take a right, and come down in front of Stumptown Park where the finish line is.
And how long do you expect the race to take?
It starts at 8:00. We need, starting at around 6 to 6:30, so we can set up the start line, and then we'll have everything cleaned up by 10:30. But really, the runners will be running between 8 and 9:30.
Okay. Any concerns from the police department?
No, this is a route that we've run numerous times in the past, and it's been very successfully done. Start to finish has been an excellent partner with us on these. So we're familiar with it, and we'll have officers at all the intersections to assist traffic as much as possible.
Mr. Blodgett?
And just for clarification, the work that Public Works has to do and the police department has to do, that will all be, that bill will be paid for by this race organization.
That's correct. There's no town funding at all for this. This is the organizers, through their fundraising or their sponsorship, pay the officers individually, and start to finish handles the cone placement and the signage and all the associated things with street closures.
Any further questions, comments, or motions? Mayor Pro Tem Garner.
I have a question about how this will work with the farmers market setup and farmers market traffic.
The duration of time that the runners are on East John Street is the only really, and it's outbound East John Street, not inbound. So we don't experience problem with farmers market traffic that morning. Now with South Trade Street, there will be signage to get them to detour up Fullwood to go around. So they would have to go, if you were normally driving up South Trade Street from, say, Weddington Road area, you would turn left on Fullwood and be able to detour around any street closure that's occurring around Stumptown Park to reach Farmers Market. Those are the only, that's the only section that would be impacted throughout the duration of the race to completely prevent vehicles from passing, if that makes sense.
That does make sense, but I just wonder what if the event organizer has coordinated with the farmers market to make sure that it fits with how they operate. I mean, they have a pretty streamlined way of working in the mornings, and they bring a valuable asset to Matthews. So I would want to make sure that they have been included in this conversation and this planning.
I have not reached out to them, but I will. I appreciate the insight. I'm not totally familiar where that is in relation to this course, so I'll make sure I get clear on that. I'll reach out to them and make sure that we're not impacting negatively what they have going on Saturday morning.
Commissioner Miller.
Thank you. I'll make the motion to approve the street closure request for Happiness Through Grace per the memorandum submitted by Stason Terrell dated May 19th, 2021.
Thank you, Commissioner Miller. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner McCool. Any further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Moving right on to 10C, consider street closure request for the Matthews Chamber. Jessica, you going to do this or?
Hey everyone, I'm Jessica Teller. I'm the Executive Director for the Matthews Chamber. So I have two street closure requests tonight. The first one is for our 30th annual motorcycle and auto reunion show. This map that is attached here is the same course that they've been using historically. This will be my first auto reunion show. So I guess we close up at the top. Cars go down here, down the middle, around the circle, and then of course we have an access for book drop-off as well, and keeping that public parking open. The closure would take place approximately at 7 a.m. on the September 6th, and would reopen approximately on 4 p.m. on the 6th as well. The second town street closure request I have is for a new event. It is our art walk that's been rebranded. It's called Fall for Matthews. That would take place October 16th. It's the exact same map that we have used previously for our annual art walk show. Just rebranded in the Fall Festival. So keeping parking open, accessibility to the chamber and around by the library, and again, another book drop-off. That would take place October 16th at 7 a.m. and until 4 p.m., and we would reopen approximately at 5 p.m. Any questions?
Any questions? Both fantastic events, very popular. Commissioner Miller? I'll make the motion to approve the street closure requests for both the Matthews Auto Reunion and Motorcycle Show on September 6th, as well as Fall for Matthews to occur on October 16th.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Miller, a second by Commissioner Whitley. Any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Move on to item 10D, consider request to reinstall traffic barriers in the right-of-way at Stumptown Station, North Trade Street.
Jay, I'll tee this up a little bit. So we have looked at this, and I think what Jay's going to talk about is parklets and kind of mobility study and kind of the bigger picture. Think about this issue that they have become popular in different parts of the country. But my concern is we have limited parking downtown, and the law for this, the state implemented this stuff as a result of COVID, and there's like parameters. For instance, the parking has to be adjacent to the business, and the business really has one parallel parking lot space in front of it. And if y'all remember last time, we really kind of took that space and then scooched it down several spaces like that. I think we actually took up another space there. The other thing that has to happen with this stuff, it's got to be ADA compliant. I'm not sure the last ones work. I mean, I didn't have that discussion. I have no idea. I am concerned kind of about this limited parking. I think, talking about the farmers market, which is very popular on Saturdays, and then we have other things going on through the town. I also think the configuration is a little bit awkward because that parallel spot, that's technically the spot right in front of Stumptown Station, it's not very wide. And then you have step downs. It's, the sidewalk's actually got 2 steps in there. And then the other things it ends up doing is you see that right-hand turn into West John Street. You actually reduce that a little bit because those barriers would encroach into the travel lane a little bit. So my advice to the board would be to not reinstall the barriers at this time, and instead really try to focus on what Jay's going to talk about, like this longer term vision about parklets and what can they do for vibrancy of the town. Given the fact you did get a request at the last meeting about reinstalling barriers, but from a staff perspective, we are not recommending that at this time.
Somebody have a comment to what Hazen said before we move on to Jay? I have one. Commissioner Miller. I agree with everything you just said, but I would like to rethink whether it could be this one space here and maybe be a parallel where you're not encroaching into the traffic. If it was this one space and maybe up to there and it was rectangular, you wouldn't be affecting the traffic. And up in Mooresville, they are building planter boxes out of steel, then obviously dirt, and wrapping them in cedar or attractive wood. And they are very heavy, and you have to move them with a forklift, according to what Mr. Urban has told me. And it would encircle the area that I'm discussing. Right. And perhaps a deck could be built where a rafter would come up to curb 1, a second rafter would come up to curb 2, because it is a challenging area. And you could create a flat surface. Now, that wouldn't be at the town's expense, I wouldn't envision. But I just think there's other ways to craft a solution.
I think that's a very fair point. I think that's the kind of thing Jay is going to touch on. I also think it's going to take a little bit of time to sort through it. I think some communities charge a rent for these kind of spaces. So in my mind, Stumptown Station was asking for an immediate solution, kind of a yes or no at this meeting. My recommendation would be no at this point. until we can sort it through kind of from a policy and ordinance standpoint. Y'all can look at like aesthetically, what should this kind of thing look like?
Mr. Camp. I'm sorry, Commissioner McCool.
Are there any other towns who still have the temporary giant orange things still up?
I have not heard anything.
Okay.
I don't ever leave my beloved Matthews, so I don't know.
That's a good answer.
Now, Mr. Camp.
Yeah, I'll just give you a brief update just to piggyback on what Hazen just said. And just as a reminder, if you did see fit to reinstall the barriers, the board would need to redo the resolution. It was only in effect during phase 2 of the reopening, so we're now in phase 3. I spent quite some time on the ABC Commission website. The last update was in September. So the extended premises for consumption that were put into place in 2020 still seem to be in effect. I couldn't find anything to the contrary. Going to the parklet concept, I mean, this is something that's been around for probably a decade now. It's a way to do some temporary placemaking in communities, but they've typically been thought of as public places where, you know, a community might sponsor it or a neighborhood association. You'd have a nice green space, and you're making a point for opening folks' eyes to other ways that you can utilize pavement in public spaces. So what's different here, and the reason that I included the packet from Milwaukee, Oregon, not Milwaukee, Wisconsin, was that they also have the concept of public and sort of hybrid parklets where a business can, in essence, lease or enter into an agreement with the community for, say, a year, and that space becomes solely for their use, for their patrons. So I thought that was somewhat innovative, and if the town did want to consider converting our temporary in-street dining guidelines to a more permanent parklet program, we could certainly do some additional research and bring something back to the board. Now, keep in mind the mobility study, removal of parking on Trade Street, highly controversial. So if staff's going to put the effort in on this, is this something that, do we want to go down this route? Because we had the concept of going from angled to parallel parking, widening the sidewalks, which would have given us a tremendous amount of amenity space and really negated the need for these Band-Aid solutions. Now, I will admit at the same time, we don't have any budget money available to spend several $1 million on a sidewalk widening project either. So maybe additional bump outs or parklets are the solution for the near term. I will also add that Block Design will be joining us on July 12th to bring us the very long awaited streetscape design plan draft to the board. So we sort of put that project on hold from, I guess it's been in process for almost 2 years, but with the mobility study, we put it on hold. And just to remind you all, that's the concept for creating a design plan for the sidewalks from curb to building face. So hopefully we'll have some more design work to share with you in 2 weeks.
I will say that having people enjoying a meal or a drink outside is really an economic driver, because when people go by and they say, wow, this place is really happening, I'm going to come to Matthews and see what's going on here. So it is a good thing. But I tend to agree with the town manager. I don't know that we want to put these orange barricades back up. Mayor Pro Tem Garner?
Are to-go drinks still permissible by the governor?
Yes. So the what? Okay.
So I guess leading from that, I mean, I another possibility, maybe I should go back. I mean, I'm not sure are we addressing the Stumptown issue, or are we moving on to the parklets? And what's the, is the point to have a public space, or is the point to satisfy expanding business?
I think the ask was specifically from Stumptown Station.
Okay, so I mean, in my mind, if we're addressing Stumptown Station, is there a space available where people could take to-go drinks and enjoy them that's not in a parking space out front?
Well, Stacey, you know a lot better than I do.
Yeah, although you can take drinks to go, consuming the drinks and public that would be against law.
That's kind of like Bourbon Street in New Orleans or something, right?
So if that makes sense, it was something they had enacted to allow to increase revenue for bars during the time when they weren't allowed to have inside seating. They have not yet rescinded the ability for them to do to-go drinks, but it was never intended that the drinking will be done in the streets, on the sidewalks, or anything like that. That's still against law. It has to be sealed when it leaves the bar and you were supposed to take it home.
Okay, and I guess my question is, or could the town permit spaces for drinking, or like we do at the park sometimes? Could we create a space where, even if it's not Stumptown, you could get your to-go drink, enjoy it up here on this lot by the nail salon,
Becky, didn't we do that for a festival? What was that
Positively Matthews?
I was thinking it was the,
beer tent.
or whatever, St. Patrick's Day. I thought we did something allow folks along on Matthews Station Street.
Yeah, the town attorney and I worked together on that ordinance a few years ago, where it is at the town manager's level to be able to pass that. There are certain parameters in certain streets that it's limited to. I would have to pull it up. It's been a while since we've had to take a look at that.
Seems like my recollection was that you couldn't cross Trade Street, I think, because for a safety concern.
Yeah, I believe it was limited to town-owned streets, so it would not involve anything that NCD.
And I think also was associated with certain special events, as opposed to being wide open, just special events for a designated period of time.
Commissioner Miller, thank you. Maureen, can we scroll through pages 3 through 9 slowly? There's a number of examples, photographic examples to help on pages 3 through 9. And I'd like to bring up the point, would we be able to create a parklet on Library Lane? Or a temporary Saturday, Sunday? I mean, I was kind of trying to plan that during COVID to a certain degree. Sort of a block party where you close down Library Lane and you have a mini festival in the backyard. I don't know if it's, if it's the best answer. I'm just trying to think outside the box, and it wouldn't be expensive.
So I see a couple issues here. One of them is kind of the parklet concept. What can that look like that's aesthetically pleasing? And then where would it be appropriate? The community feel comfortable with it, the board would like it, and does it help businesses? And then how do you lease it to the business? Some of these parklets, I think, are for public use, right? Anybody can do, and somebody can camp out there all day and mess around on the Wi-Fi. So I think some of that is kind of what's the community want? Is there a way does it help break up, let's say, North Trade Street a little bit? Or could you use the railroad parking lot, right? I mean, there's some, take some spaces away. And then I guess the third concept is really kind of this festival, which would have a kind of festival-like atmosphere that would have drinking, right? Some kind of controlled environment like we've done down at Stumptown Park. We could certainly explore that. I guess we're looking some of these we're looking for direction from the board, because traditionally we've been pretty conservative about alcohol. I remember when I first got here, we didn't serve alcohol at the community center. And that was kind of a debate 15 years ago. So it does seem like we've moved in a different direction about alcohol in public spaces. But it's really a community value that the board, I think, needs to help this. I mean, we can give you ideas, but y'all got to say, no, that we're not comfortable with this, or we do like that.
Mr. Buckley.
I was just going to add, too, that we have to make a distinction between beer and wine and mixed beverages, because mixed beverages would be covered by the ABC guidelines. And I don't think we can't do anything that would expand ABC permits, but I think we would have, and have proven to have, times where we can allow in the public sector beer and wine to drink, but not mixed drinks.
Does Stumptown serve beer and wine?
Yeah. But they favor specialty drinks hard drink.
My recommendation was maybe we table this because a lot of ideas have been floated up. Look at the pros and cons. I certainly would like to have the police input on any of these suggestions. So maybe we table it for a couple weeks. Is that a motion? Mayor Pro Tem Gardner.
Yeah, I'd like to add one more comment. I mean, I do think if parklets are an answer, there are like prefab parklets that Stumptown could order and bring in something that's attractive and already, up to the standard. Or could they come back to us and say, hey, we found this one. Would you approve this for us? Could we give them some sort of direction while we deliberate what the bigger picture is?
Well, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's a consensus of the commissioners and myself not to expand in the area they had previously because it's too big. And I think even the applicant said that they didn't want to do that. They wanted to consider a smaller space. So,
I mean, I think that's what these prefab ones are, like 1 or 2 parallel spots. So it's not the same. I mean, if we ask them to come back with something more specific so that they can go ahead and get moving on some ideas, and then we could vote on that specific and then discuss what the broader vision for the town is. That way they have the ability to make up some of their lost revenue from COVID.
yeah, we could maybe permit something temporarily again before we decided on a permanent parklet solution if we're going to go that route. Commissioner Urban?
I mean, I think that's a reasonable interim solution. They need to have skin in the game. Let them look for the appropriate type of temporary parklet. They in some regards have that one parallel space in front of their location. Okay, it's 10 by, let's say it's 10 by 20, 200 square feet. That's 13 to 15 people, tables and chairs. I think it's a good compromise, at least in the interim. But my recommendation is a parklet isn't about serving alcohol or an extension of the restaurant space. It's about public space and widening the sidewalks, basically. I'd like to see the planning staff develop a parklet program. All the communities around here are developing them, or if they already have one. We don't have sidewalks, interestingly enough. You can't even pass people without, turning sideways and getting around. So I think we have an opportunity to do it, but we need to be sensitive about the parking issue. But it would seem to me that the town's parklet program would create, as indicative of the TOD presentation, you notice all the street paraphernalia was coordinated. And so you knew it was the sort of public realm, and that's what our parklet system would sort of entail. But I think in fairness to Kevin and those guys and Brandon, to give them some latitude to do a little bit of homework and find a solution just for that one parking space that's tasteful. And if they come up with something, let them have that for a duration. And in the meantime, we look at a parklet program that might expand throughout the town.
So maybe we bring this back in 2 weeks to discuss further, or do we need longer than that?
Well, here's my takeaways, at least, is that we could reach out to the Stumptown Station folks and say, the board is open to some ideas. What can you bring back, focusing on that, excuse me, that parallel space in front of your building, recognizing you got to make it ADA, blah, 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 blah. And so they could bring back some ideas. I do think probably it's a public space. You probably should consider some kind of leasing, and maybe it's a nominal amount. I think somebody was $100 a year or something. Doesn't have to be a lot, but and then I think the second point would be the bigger ask would be about parklets in general, around the downtown area that could help create small green spaces.
Would this area here, and I don't have the sun laser, the John Ross version that Commissioner Miller had, but you're doing damage to the screen with that, I think. Is this area right here, would that be considered part of their space as well, or just the one parallel?
Well, I mean, we could.
What is this right here?
Oh, it's just
Loading drop-off zone. It wasn't big enough for an angle
transitioning from one lane to 2 lanes.
Mm-hmm. So maybe a small piece of that could be included. I don't know.
It would need to be reevaluated by Susan Pepino-Willard. So she did the layout and assessed the safety concerns with this layout. So anything that's newly proposed she
So it
would
could be
review.
more than just a parallel space. If Susan said.
I'm just
like,
thinking that's really small. If we can include a little piece of that, that might be.
Yeah, if we
make it
can
a little-
go straight up that line like there.
Yeah.
And then bring it in at a 90-degree angle, and let them, I've already sent them a link to the presentation so that they can see the photos that are included. Because it gives you a lot of ideas.
Commissioner McCool?
I am in favor of giving them some latitude in that, but I do want to bring up maybe a safety concern, as I've been sitting there when traffic's backed up and people cut through that space to get into the turn lane. I mean, I see it all the time, so we need to make sure there's some safety precautions, because I don't want someone sitting there enjoying their cocktail and get run over by a truck or something. I've seen it happen. I mean, I've seen vehicles cut that every day. So we need to make sure.
I think the other key point made here tonight was it has to be tasteful and, aesthetically pleasing. Those orange barricades look terrible. I had some other words, but I'll be nice. Commissioner Bland?
I don't know if it's possible or not, it looks like it's part of that same building, the spaces along the side over there of that building. Why couldn't they use some of that space to not, like here, you know what I'm saying? And I don't think in the evenings these businesses along there are open, or are they? I don't believe they are. I think the jewelry shop and I think there was a card place or something over there, but that's a big space right there. They could use, of course, there was pending their customers would have to walk back and forth there, but it wouldn't be blocking. Is that possible?
Could be like a private lease or something.
Yeah, the tough part about that is the regs talk about adjacent. So the regs talk about adjacent. So this is not, so if you look adjacently, it comes like their building comes out like right here and then right here. And so that's why the focus has always been in this area.
But that's actually part of the property. That's not in the public right of way. That stuff on the left over there is property that's owned by the owners of that building.
Now, let me just see. I don't know. Does anybody know?
It's got to be, I'm sorry, the ABC law is going to be contiguous with the with the actual licensed establishment. So Stumptown Station is the consideration as the licensed establishment. The other businesses would create a break, and they wouldn't be allowed by ABC law to serve that far away.
Good thought.
Do some, think outside the box.
All right. Again, Hazen, do we need 2 weeks or a month, or what do we want?
So I'd say, let's see, 2 weeks, maybe we bring back some ideas about the parallel space. To me, that's on them, making sure Susan signs off on this, Jay.
Absolutely.
And then how much time do we need? I would also think the other ask is to look at a parklet program, which is not addressing this, but talking about the bigger picture for the town. 60 days, Jay?
Yeah.
Okay.
We have the basis of it in place now. It would just be a matter of using some best practices from around the country to crib
So
from.
60 days for the parklet? Is that
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. Fine by me. Everybody else all right with that? All right. We're done with this item? He said? You guys ready? Okay.
I will add one last thing. Since you all had this discussion, you can look up House Bill 781, which would have allowed social districts around the state, which would allow you to essentially carry a beverage around the municipality to create a district where you can open carry a beverage. It's stuck in, I think it was referred to committee last week, but this conversation is being had statewide. So it's interesting.
It's called the Bourbon Street Bill, I think.
I think the Bourbon Street, well, I didn't know that, but if you weren't aware of it.
I think we would get a request for more police officers if we.
Yeah, if you go to Bourbon Street, you can see police in action because they're arresting somebody, it seems like every 60 seconds down there. All right, we'll move on to item 10E, consider fence encroachment in the public right-of-way. Hazel.
Pretty straightforward, Mr. Mayor. It's town board authorized the manager to sign the encroachment agreement for fence on 523 Deer Creek Drive. That's it.
Commissioner McCool?
I'll make the motion to have the town manager sign the encroachment agreement for a fence on 523 Deer Creek Drive.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner McCool, second by Commissioner Miller. I just like to state I'm in favor of this because the fence has been there for 30 years and hasn't caused any issues. So, any other questions, comments, Commissioner Miller?
I have a question regarding the other fence that's been a topic, backyard versus front yard, et cetera. Could this same encroachment agreement be discussed for that property owner?
I believe though that's a zoning matter, and that would be a part of the zoning on that property issue. That would not have anything to do with the public right of way.
Okay.
All right, we have a motion by Commissioner McCool, a second by Commissioner Miller. Is there any further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Go on to item 10F, consider reclassification of police officer position to police public information officer. Captain Tyrell.
Thank you, Mayor and Board. We appreciate the opportunity to also talk about this position within the police department of the public information officer. This position has definitely evolved over the years and is become extremely vital to efforts that we have, not only for reaching out and communicating with our community, providing a better, more modern community police relationship, which is extremely important to us at this time, and will continue to be and has been in the past, but will continue to be even more so in the future. It also is an opportunity. The public information officer has grown into something that is not only marketing the organization to the community, but also for potential candidates, where we talk about things like recruiting and trying to attract the best candidates in an extremely competitive market. We believe that the Matthews Police Department, our agency, has one of the best public information officers and programs that are seen anywhere, especially in an agency our size. As if you had an opportunity to go through the memo, public information officer never in the past has had to do things like the social media outreach that we do now, where we're literally reaching hundreds of thousands of people, really across the country. But of course, we're very concerned or very focused on regionally. But it has been a great promotion for us, for law enforcement in general, and especially the police department, the town of Matthews. So with that in mind, we're seeking a reclassification of the police officer, the public information officer's position, from a 17 to an 18, to be more in line with the responsibilities and the level of work that is being done by that position. Also, our public information officer is somewhat available 24/7, 365, because we never know when there's going to be a major incident. And so it's an additional burden that position holds that's unique to any other position of a standard police officer.
Mr. Whitley.
Mayor, I had opportunity Saturday morning, 9 o'clock, to have bridge building barbershop talk with the barbershop here on right across from Stumptown Park. Myself and Pastor Chuck, along with probably 25 residents, people coming in and getting a haircut. The barbershop owner partnered with WBT and had a host there to talk about town of Matthews and racial bridge building and how can we, and this officer was there, the public information officer was there. He's been on the job, and I know him personally, and I've seen his work. He is tireless, do some things for Matthews. I know he is partnered with Mount Moriah several times, and with kids playing basketball and trying to make community race. I've never seen him complain. He's a slick sleeve, if that's what you would call it, pretty much, and never got into promotion system. But I'd like to make a motion that we reclassify this position of the PIO from grade 17 to up to grade 18 within the town of Matthews pay plan.
Second. Thank you, Commissioner Whitley. We have a second by Commissioner Miller. Is there any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. I would just like to add that we really appreciate, I know I speak for the entire board, of this officer keeping us informed of what's going on in town on a very timely basis, because when something happens here, all of us inevitably can start getting phone calls and emails and texts, so it's good to know what's going on. So we appreciate being updated.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, move on to the last item under agenda item 10, 10G, receive the monthly budget report from Teresa Falk.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Board. This report is kind of a lot like last month. There are still some revenues, as you can see from the report, that are slightly down from the same time in prior years. However, sales tax is significantly higher than the same time last year, which eases the gap and makes up for a lot of the revenues that are trending lower than this time last year. And then department expenditures are up just slightly compared to the same time last year. However, year-to-date revenues are exceeding expenditures by a much higher gap than the same time last year. We're at the end of May, revenues exceeded expenditures by $1.26 million compared to only $40,000 last year at the same time. So the town is in a much different situation than at the current time last year. And then the tourism revenues, again, are also in an odd spot. They are higher than FY20 year to date because things have opened up a little more. I think people are, we're able to do some things, but it still represents an overall decline in revenue because of the way that we conservatively budgeted tourism revenues for this year based on the pandemic and the things that were going on. However, tourism fund revenues are exceeding year-to-date expenditures by over $597,000. And same time last year, we were only operating at a $17,000 surplus at this time. Does anyone have any questions?
Commissioner Urban.
So why, not a hypothesis as to why tourism is eclipsing versus last year?
Again, part of it is because we budgeted very conservatively. So we budgeted lower. So the collection percentage is higher because the budget was adjusted for the expected revenues this year versus FY20. The budget was set basically before the pandemic kicked in and really brought things down. So you lowered the expectation, so the percentage is higher.
So you're saying back in June of last year, in the middle of COVID,
right?
We slash and burn that budget item.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, we didn't know what was going to happen.
Because we didn't know what was going to happen.
Gotcha.
Any other comments or questions for Teresa? Thank you. Appreciate the presentation. All right, we'll go on to agenda item number 11, Mayor's Report. I last week was invited, as I think everybody in this board was, but I don't know if anybody else went, but the North Carolina Board of Barber Examiners came to town, and they have they meet in different locations throughout the state, and they met in Matthews, and the chairman of their board, Dennis Seaver's parents, live at Matthews Glen. So that's one of the reasons I came to Matthews. But in any event, I had the opportunity to meet one of the board members, and his name is David Williams, and he so happens to be a town commissioner in the town of Hickory. And so
Mr. Mayor,
yes,
I have a question that I think the town manager should have added you on to the agenda. You're not added on there.
You're not on there as 11. We have attorney. Is there two versions?
What, for the record?
Yeah. That we, clerical administrative oversight.
permission to speak, sir?
Is it okay though, for the record, just for the record, so it's been recorded, it is not on the agenda. Can we add that, Hazen, to the agenda?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay. I got you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry for the
That's all right.
rush, man.
So anyway, David Williams is a commissioner in Hickory, and we got talking, and we have exchanged a few emails and discussed the possibility of maybe members from this board going to Hickory and having their board come here to compare best practices and things like that. And we did this once before. Our board, we several years ago went to Fort Mill, and I have to admit, one of the naysayers. I said, "Well, what do we?" Rock Hill. Gosh, Rock Hill. And I didn't think we would learn much from it. Jay, you were on that trip, and it was really good to see what other towns do and to learn from their best practices. So, just bringing this to attention, we've just exchanged a few emails, but I believe Hickory is about 70 miles from here, but we might be a nice trip to go up and see what they do. They have a historic district, much like we do. I believe they're a little bit larger than us by population, but yeah, if there's an interest, we can ask town staff to look into that. The only other comment I have is I think a lot of people know that I'm a North Carolina State graduate, and I was heartbroken to see my baseball team that was likely to probably would have won the College World Series of Baseball have to forfeit because of COVID. And I was talking to the town manager before this meeting, and I said, boys, why didn't you just get a vaccine? You know, I mean, several of their players got COVID, and they forfeited the opportunity to play in the College World Series Championship. So that's something they'll remember forever. But the point being that we still have people that are unwilling to get the vaccine, and I hope you really reconsider that. I've seen more and more reports about the Indian variant, or whatever they call that now. I think that's Delta. It's not politically incorrect, but the Delta variant is very virulent, and it's picking up on a lot of places. And North Carolina is one of those states that doesn't have a super majority of their citizens with the vaccine. So if you haven't got the vaccine, please consider it for your own health and safety. I can't imagine, not denying the opportunity to get vaccinated and then finding yourself in a hospital on a ventilator and saying, boy, all I had to do was get vaccinated, I wouldn't be here. It would be a terrible feeling. So I think my fellow NC State students there were probably pretty heartbroken by their decisions as well. That's all I have. Now we'll go on to the attorney's report.
Mayor, let me just echo real quickly before I give my report that this blue-blooded Tar Heel was devastated by that also. Believe it or not, we do pull for state when we're out of it. So we were devastated. I was anyway. Nevertheless, two quick things. Number one, I want to thank the board for the confidence in allowing me to serve again. In March of 1978, I told the board that hired me that night that it was a privilege to serve this board, and here 43 plus years later, it is still a privilege to serve this board. So I want to thank all of you. And now my first act is under the new contract will be the Municipal Attorney Summer Conference. It's August 5th through the 8th, and I would like permission to attend that summer conference under the travel policies of the city. You need a motion, yes. She won't pay the expenses.
I'll make that motion.
Okay. Motion by Commissioner Miller, second by Commissioner Bland. All in favor? All opposed? Only because you said those good words about state.
And thank goodness, because I submitted my reservation it was today on the time credit card.
will say that when Charlie started here, he looked a lot like Ken McCool.
And that's the truth.
Move on to the town manager's report.
I do have one thing. So the property that we purchased, the 4+ acres over there on Matthews Mint Hill Road, across from First Halsey Park, the house has been cleaned out and it is ready to rent. And we walked through it the other day. It's in really, really good shape. And so we deal with a realtor because we have 2 other houses on Fremont Street that this company, whatever, manages them for us. She said she felt like the market rate for the house was $1,895. And we charge market rate for the other 2 houses. I wanted to bring this to your attention. Typically, we would not bring this to your attention, but I know Mayor Pro Tem and I had a conversation a while back about affordable housing, and I know we're very excited about ARPA funds really to help us get into the affordable housing market. But traditionally, we've charged market rate for our houses that we own, but it's really at the board's discretion on what you all would like to do. I just wanted to bring that up.
How many bedrooms is it?
It's a 3-bedroom. It's a modern laid out house. It's a nice house. But the market rate would be about $1,900 a month.
Seems a little high to me.
Seems very high.
I mean, I would like to see. Can I finish?
Are you going to set the rent based
Commissioner Bland.
The question in my mind, are we going to have it as a sliding type thing, depending on income? Is that what you're suggesting for affordable housing? I don't know how we'd go about doing that. That'd be a real can of worms, I would think. How would we approach that situation? If you set it for $1,000, is someone making a huge sum of money? That wouldn't be fair to the taxpayers either. How do you address that issue?
Well, I think obviously that's the reason I brought up the board. If the board direction is keep it in market rent, we need the money to pay back the debt, we can do that. But I do think we could explore if somebody wanted to say, well, what would we need if somebody were at 60% of AMI or 80% of AMI? And we could reach out to the housing authority. I'm sure there's systems out there like, okay, here's how you verify income, you check credit, whatever you got to do. That's kind of a new area, but it's something we could get into if that's the will of the board.
Commissioner McCool, is there a way we can look into this and maybe come back in 2 weeks? Because this, with the vote tonight on allotting $1.5 million for that, prioritizing that would be an interesting way to get our feet wet, seeing what it looks like before we start this new project.
Sure. I may be in the minority. I believe, I have the same opinion as Commissioner Bland in that I think we ought to charge a market rate. It's taxpayers bought the house. We should reward the taxpayers with the maximum amount we can get for it.
I think there's 2 separate issues. One is the town wants to look at that, look at directing a policy and advertising to everybody else we're doing, but you bought a pricey piece of land, the market rate, actually right up the street, 3-bedroom full rent apartment townhome is $2,000 and that's considered low. So $1,800 for a 3-bedroom is very reasonable in that price point. But I think it's in 2 weeks, they're not going to be able to assemble all the information about what happens at 60% AMI and 80% AMI. You're going to have a policy. I mean, you don't want to go in this willy-nilly, but that's definitely something we want to begin to investigate. But I would say leave it at market rate at this time being.
Obviously, it's the will of the board. I think investigating it doesn't hurt. I don't think we're hurting for the rent money next month.
That's fine. We can wait 2 weeks for sure.
Sure.
All right. So, is that good?
Okay. We'll see what we can pull together.
That it?
That's it.
Bad. All right. Motion from Commissioner Miller, second by Commissioner McCool. All in favor? All opposed? Good night.
Thank you.
All right.
make it